Today is now March 18th, 2023, and this is the 35th episode and 26th episode of Season 2 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. We got a little bit of a blend today, Big Ten report with Joe Mead, and a little bit of a round of 64 recap. As always, I'm your host, Sean Bowles, and today we're being joined by Joe Mead. And Joe, what a crazy round of 64. A lot of things happened, a couple big headlines with some Big Ten teams, but before we get into it, any takeaways from the round of 64, or is it madness as usual?
Well, certainly madness as usual, but I don't know how, me being a Big Ten fan, I can't address the 9,000-pound elephant in the corner of the room, and that's Purdue losing to our home state's Fairleigh Dickinson, which, people made jokes about, but oh my God, Sean, we joked about in the podcast, I just remembered 2 days ago, and how their coach was talking about how they wanted to play Purdue, and my God, I guess in typical Jersey fashion, it paid off. I am genuinely speechless. I went to the Purdue account to get a gauge of their fan base, and I think some of them are convinced they're cursed. And after today, if I was a Purdue fan, I would feel the exact same way because I can't explain how Purdue would lose a game that way. I guess we could get more into it in a few seconds, but Sean, I mean, what's your take on it?
So I think that's a good place to start, Joe, in the East region there. Fairleigh Dickinson becoming the second ever 16 seed to win. And they're actually the first NEC school to win a round of 64 games. So that's double record breakers there. And, there's a way that could have totally backfired on them, but it didn't. And they stuck to their game plan, and they probably wouldn't have won any other game if you played them 100 times, but they made the key shots, and Purdue didn't. And, it comes to a larger conversation, Joe, about the state of their program. 3 straight losses to double-digit seeds. They had a really good season, number 1 seed for a reason, but those guards could not stay in front of the FDU guards, and I think you can. I'll get your opinion on this, but I think it was clearly weighing on Purdue. I mean, they were airballing wide open threes. That doesn't usually happen, and I think that it clearly affected them. And Edey can only do so much, 21 and 15, but I'm just shocked still. And congratulations to FDU, but Purdue. I mean, three years in a row losing to double-digit seeds. I think they might be cursed.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the logical side of it right now. My general take is Purdue, when they were really good, they were getting Edey 19 shots, 20 shots a game. Tonight, 7 for 11, really good stat line, not blaming him by any means, and hit 7 free throws to get to 21. But, man, I think that's exactly it, Sean. You hit it right on the head. I think Purdue, there was fear. And I don't think it was with Edey, and I don't even think it was with Matt Painter. And people are going to blame Matt Painter, as they should. He's the head coach. But I really think it was weighing on those freshman guards. And that's something we've talked about. We're going to get into Michigan State probably pretty soon here. The presence of a veteran backcourt in March, especially in the round of 64, is huge. Because the round of 64 is where we see we've grown up in the social media age, so let's address it. We're the same age as a lot of these players, and some are younger, so they've seen the big side of it. They know the precedence and the pressure for double-digit seed or the ultimate Cinderella, which is what FDU was, upsetting you and how you'd go down in infamy. And Purdue, unfortunately for them, I really think that weighed down on them. They just did not look like, Purdue didn't even play well down the stretch, in our opinion, and they didn't even look like that team. They looked like a team that I hadn't seen since the 2019-2020 season when they just seemed helpless, and that's really shocking. I really am a fan of Matt Painter. I think he's a phenomenal coach. If you win the Big Ten regular season and Big Ten tournament, it's a phenomenal year. But for Purdue fans, we'll talk about this on more our off-season podcasts. This is just the same story for them, and it's I guess, maybe not the same story, but different story, but the same ending. So, I mean, Purdue fans, if you saw the board in their locker room, it's definitely weighing on the players too. I could not tell you that it was a lack of care or effort you could blame a lot of things, but I don't think you can blame that. But yeah, not a good look for the conference. We'll get into that on future podcasts. Me and Sean talked about it a little before our recording. But Sean, should we move on and get your closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll just read out a couple stats here. Gillis 3 for 10 from the field, 1 for 7 from three. Remember, he can shoot it. 9 threes against Penn State, I believe. Braden Smith 2 for 10. Foster Lawyer 4 for 10.
Fletcher.
Fletcher Lawyer, not Foster Lawyer. Good catch. Brandon Newman 1 for 4. Ethan Morton 0 for 2. David Jenkins 0 for 3. So they were I'm not doing the math, but that is really poor percentage from those combined players. And Caleb First was 2 for 2 from the field, but nobody who took more than 3 shots was above 50% from the field other than Zach Edey. And I've said this on the account multiple times. FDU coming into the NCAA tournament, 361st in defensive efficiency. Now that bumped up 10 or so spots, I think, after their first 4 win, but to hold the 7th best offense to 58 points is pretty incredible. FDU can score it at least decently well. They're in the top half in Division I in that, but all systems fail from Purdue, and I think it completely erases everything that they did this season, and that's how unfortunate it is. Teams are remembered by what they do in the tournament, and you can have a really bad regular season, sneak into the tournament, and go on a run, and people will call it a good season. But I think we can move on. Florida Atlantic did beat Memphis on a last-second shot, so I think that's big. I think FDU has a much better chance against FAU rather than Memphis. We'll see what happens there. Duke smoked Oral Roberts. Huge win for the Blue Devils there. They looked in control the whole way. Tennessee kind of limped past Louisiana. It's going to be a tough game for them next against Duke. Kentucky used their defense to beat Providence. Oscar Shivo had 25 rebounds. Pretty good there. And then Kansas State beat Montana State by 12 or 13 or something. They were in control for the majority of the second half. That was on one of my side TVs, so I didn't watch every play of that game. But the 7-10 matchup here, Joe, which led us off today, had the Spartans, and they ended up winning pretty handily against USC. I thought Michigan State played really well, especially early, because USC was hitting some shots. But good start for Izzo, and I think they'll have a shot against Marquette.
Absolutely, and if people are forgetting, because this might have been before even the BC era of the world, Joey Hauser is a former Marquette player, right, John?
Yeah.
That's a story that I didn't even think of until now, looking at the stat line here. But no, Michigan State, the story of the game for me was their defense. The second half, USC was taking, not even tough, they were taking terrible shots. That was low percentage. To acknowledge the other elephant in the room, it was St. Patrick's Day today, so it was a heavy day for a lot of people in bars. And the overwhelming reaction, especially in the state of Michigan, there were a few closeted Michigan State fans in our Ann Arbor bars, was they were on fire because they knew USC had no way to come back. They weren't very far behind most of the second half, usually 8 to 10, nothing insurmountable by any means with the talent they have, but they just did not take good shots, turning the ball over. And Michigan State, this is what you want to see from Joey Hauser. 4 of 6 from 3. I think he played one of his best games of the year. I understand 17 points isn't overwhelming, but him hitting threes is so important for the Spartans. And they were only 5 of 14 from 3, so he was 80% of their threes. I don't think Tyson Walker had his best game, and I actually think that's a good thing for Michigan State because I think if he finds his groove again, especially against Marquette, that could be a really good side. Solid all together from all the guards between Akins, Hogard, and Walker, though. Definitely not their best games, but they didn't need to have their best game today. Today they won with their defense and a lot of contribution for the bench too. And so if I'm a Michigan State fan right now, I'm feeling pretty good. I understand it wasn't a blowout victory, but that's as impressive a win as you could have in the round of 64 against a very talented team. What do you think, Sean?
I think you got it right with the defense. I thought USC actually made a couple really tough shots early, and they just kept at it. Boogie Ellis 3 of 12, Drew Peterson 4 of 10. These are high level guards that might have a future in the NBA, and they did it and they kept with it, and nobody did anything crazy today, which I think Like, that is a very repeatable performance. That's not a Tyson Walker 35-point game where he hits 8 threes. He had 17 from Hauser, 12 from Akins, 11 from Hogard, 12 from Walker. That's probably right about their averages. So, Marquette, like we said, beat Vermont. Let's see, they won by 17. I don't think they were in much trouble there. It looked like they were up double digits most of the game. I have Marquette as my champion, but I think there's a real good chance that MSU could get them. I think that'll be a really good game. And the Joey Hauser storyline's big. Marquette sort of set up similar to Michigan State, I think. Not really a star, but a couple guys who can do some things, and pretty much everybody's a threat. So that'll be a really good matchup. And so the next bracket we'll go into, Joe, is the South region. So that's up on the screen. So Alabama took care of Texas A&M Corpus Christi pretty easily. Brandon Miller didn't score in the first half, or maybe the game, but it feels like so long ago. It was just yesterday. But Brandon Miller did not score, only 19 minutes, but they were in control there. They will face another Big Ten team that we'll talk about here, Maryland. In the first game yesterday, they beat West Virginia. They're down big early, but a serious comeback from Kevin Willard's guys. And it's going to be tough for them against Alabama, but I think winning a round of 64 game in year one is a big accomplishment for them, especially because that's something that Kevin Willard hasn't always done. So your thoughts on the Terps' victory, and do you think they have any shot against Alabama?
For our religious listeners, one guy being shot up highlighted repeatedly is Hakeem Hart. And he played very well. And I think when he plays well, that could be an X factor, because you're going to get good games out of Reese, Scott, and Young. Usually 2 of the 3 play well. And then if that's accompanied from a three-headed monster with Hakeem Hart, that is really good. And I understand he missed the free throw at the end. That gave West Virginia a shot. All right, that's one play in the game, so I don't want people highlighting that and freaking out. But very impressive from Maryland. And this is a game that I thought was pretty, I don't want to say physical, but very defensive-based. Would you say that's fair, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at the fouls now because we said there might be a lot, but there was only 24 on West Virginia and only 19 on Maryland. But we thought West Virginia was going to win it. I think they were in position to, but Maryland really took over towards the end of the game. And what I was most impressed with was Jameer Young only having 10 points on 1 of 5 shooting, and them still winning. So that was pretty impressive, and I think it was as true of a toss-up game as it gets. And Maryland happened to be on the right side of it. And I know we're not a Big 12 podcast, Joe, but that could have been Bob Huggins' last game. So, any more thoughts really on the Terps? Do they, or you want to move on?
One thing I would say for Maryland, I think odds are stacked against you in terms of Alabama. One thing we've praised Maryland for doing is playing very good defense this year. And if anyone's going to beat Alabama, it's going to be through playing very good defense. And we just talked about Jameer Young only scoring 10 points on 1 of 5 shooting. That cannot be replicated again to beat Alabama. You don't need to pay us to tell you that, but I think Maryland's been in some close games of late, and I really think they, especially the last day of the regular season at Penn State, maybe having that kind of experience, or like the classic song, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," that wasn't really a defining loss for them, and I really think that did make them stronger. Playing in games in March late, there's no practice for that other than playing in close games in the regular season. So my overall take is, we've talked about this with teams that maybe even better than Maryland, is it's not always good to go 31-0 and blow out teams by 10 points, because if you're in a close game in March, there is nothing like do or die, win or face death, essentially. And Maryland, I think with their growing pains, finally saw the good side of it. So good for Maryland, good for Kevin Willard. Like Sean said, winning a tournament game year one is huge for him. So I think anything from here as a Maryland fan, I would take his house money.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to defend the paint, so maybe our Alabama doesn't have a great 3-point shooting day, and every starter except for Reese hit one in this game, so maybe you make a couple shots too, and you never know. But In other places there, San Diego State knocked off Charleston, one of those teams that kind of won every game, like you said, Joe, and really just didn't have that last push to kind of get over the hump there. Furman upset Virginia after a pretty horrible turnover by Kihei Clark, a former national champion, but just one of those moments, I think. And then Creighton beat NC State today. That was a pretty close game. Yeah, Creighton ended up winning by 9, but Terquavion Smith 32 for the Wolfpack and Kalkbrenner 31 for Creighton. And then Baylor took care of Santa Barbara today after, I think, losing by 1 at halftime. Creighton-Baylor, that's going to be a good one in the round of 32. And then Missouri took care of Utah State with a nice second half. And Princeton with the first big upset of the week. This was yesterday. They knocked off Arizona. And what a terrible shooting day from the Wildcats. Princeton didn't even do anything crazy either. They were just 4 of 25 from 3. So Missouri, Princeton will be next. So the next bracket we'll go into here, Joe, is the West region. Kansas took care of Howard, as we would expect. And then here in the 8-9 games, our next Big Ten team, Arkansas, falling to Illinois. With the preseason expectations, I think this is a failure of a season from Illinois, and I don't think that's too harsh.
No, I don't think it's harsh at all. And, when you look at the whole body of work, let's just take the first round upset out of it. Just an up and down year, the entire year.
More downs than ups recently, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You figured they would get together for all the veteran experience, but we're not going to rag on any one guy today, but I'll just give an example from the game yesterday. Coleman Hawkins, 3 of 9 from the field, scoring only 10 points. These are games where you need your veterans to step up, and unfortunately for the Illini, it did not happen. And I'm not going to make any assessments about chemistry on the team, but it's impossible to ignore Sky Clark leaving.
Something's up with the chemistry there.
Yeah,
it's pretty clear.
Something's going on. And if I'm an Illini fan, I'm not saying to get your pitchforks and go on the Fire Underwood train. I still think he's upgraded the program since John Gross has left. But, this is just more of the same. We're going to get into this later, I'm sure, with Iowa, but not so different from Purdue. It's Illinois fans have seen this story over and over and over, and especially this ending for the Illini. And it's kind of insane, Sean, that we're going to have to wait till 2024 to see if Illinois can break now a 19-year streak that will continue of not making the Sweet 16, which for Illinois, a very proud historic program, is not a good streak to have alive. So overall, other takes from the game, I think Terrence Shannon showed why he's the best player on the team. I know he did hit a three-pointer, but still scoring 20 points in his defense. I think he was your most valuable player the whole year, and he showed why, but that's really the only positive. Me and Sean both picked Arkansas in this game. Not a surprise again for the Illini, but certainly not a ending without pain. Sean, what's your take?
Yeah, I think most of the things you got to add, I just think Arkansas was a really bad matchup for them. Arkansas was a team kind of like Illinois with really great expectations at the beginning of the year. And the thing with Arkansas is their players got injured, and then they came back. And they've been playing really well since they came back. So they're probably playing at the level of a 5 or 6 seed. But obviously getting the 8 seed here, Arkansas doesn't shoot a lot of threes. They were just 3 of 11. But I came away with the fact that Illinois just got punked inside. And a couple, of these Arkansas players are lottery picks, or at least first round. So you can understand why they were able to get to the hoop. But Illinois fans that I know are not disappointed that the season's over. They kind of just wanted it to end. It wasn't, even if they had won this game, it was probably going to end against Kansas. So Underwood's got a lot to figure out. I think the team could look a lot different next year. I believe Shannon has another year if he wants. I don't think he deserves any of the blame. He's been pretty awesome this year, I would say. And you just look at his game log here. He is consistently in double digits. The last time he wasn't was against Wisconsin when they won. But rarely having a bad day from the field. Only a couple in here that I can see. But the rest of the way, Matt Meyer, Coleman Hawkins, you just can't have those sorts of efforts and expect to win. I mean, 0 for 6 for Meyer, Hawkins 3 for 9. Both have had really great games this year, and others they've had absolute duds. So we'll talk about the direction of Illinois in the off season, but Arkansas, Kansas tomorrow, that is going to be a really, really good one. So in the rest of the West, St. Mary's took care of VCU today. I thought really impressive performance for them against VCU's physicality. And UConn, despite trailing by 2 at halftime, throttled Iona in the second half. Sinogo, amazing game from the UConn big man. TCU hit a last-second shot to beat Arizona State in the late session here, and then Gonzaga took care of Grand Canyon. I don't think I ever watched that game, to be honest, but they won by 14 or something like that. So TCU Gonzaga, if you watched the show on Sunday after the bracket was revealed, we asked for that matchup. We really wanted to see it, and we got it on Sunday. That'll be a good one. And then the 7-10 matchup here, Joe, our next Big Ten team, Boo Buie and Northwestern, beat Boise State like we thought they would. Really good game from Northwestern, I think, and they're going to be liking their chances against UCLA.
Yeah, no, phenomenal performance. And when Bowie and Adis, their dynamic duo, does well, they are really tough to beat. We've seen that in the regular season. And I've noticed a trend in Northwestern games. They never really blow anyone out. But in this game, they just had control the whole way. Even when their leads would slip to 4 or 5, either Bowie or Adis would hit a shot. And Adis is someone who's been decently inconsistent all year, but he's playing his best basketball in the tournament, which is exactly what Northwestern needed. Not great from 3 overall. Ty Berry hit 3 of 4, but then the rest of the team was 5 of 17. So I think for Northwestern, that's normally 38.1% for anyone's pretty good, but Northwestern, I think, could shoot even better than that. And I think for their next round matchup, which we'll get into, they're definitely going to have to. Other impressions from Northwestern, I mean, just your veteran poise, and we've highlighted this a million times, but it's a thing, and it's a thing that has to come up because in March, as we see, the more veteran teams in the Big Ten are the ones that we see advancing right now, and we'll get into this later. But that's the constant X factor, and you can never undervalue experience. And I understand Northwestern hasn't been to the tournament in 6 years now, but a lot of those guys have been around the block. They know what it takes to win. And right now, Northwestern, in the 2 tournaments they've been in, they've always been in the round of 32. So, Sean, What do you think about the Wildcats?
I was really impressed, and I think if you had not had a scoreboard bug on your screen and you had only watched the game, I think you would have thought that Northwestern was up at least 8 the whole way. And that's credit to them. They took care of the ball. They only turned the ball over 7 times, 49% from the field. It doesn't feel like to me that they ever go crazy from 3, but 8 for 21, pretty good, 38%, and they made their free throws. Seemed like a very repeatable formula. They did get out-rebounded, but that didn't end up mattering. And then they played defense. I think they're a pretty good matchup for UCLA because UCLA is very similar to them, and UCLA did blow out UNC Asheville, which was pretty impressive because a lot of people thought that might be an upset pick. But for the most part, they don't really do that. And if it's a close game and you need Boo Buie to make a shot, he might do it. So I know they only ended up winning by 8, but Northwestern total control from start to finish. If you didn't watch this game, you thought, all right, maybe they just kind of got them. But I was impressed with their defense. Barnheiser and Verhoeven getting a lot of minutes. Barron and Nicholson both under 20. So they're not as thin as some of these other teams. They go 8 deep and everybody plays at least 10 minutes. So they got guards that will give anybody issues. And, when Barry and Barnheiser and some of these other guys are scoring, they're really tough. You don't need 20 from Barnheiser like you probably do from Bowie and Adish. You probably need 20. You probably need 50 combined points from those two to beat UCLA. But if you can get 10 or 15 from Barry and Barnheiser, you got a good chance to win. But, yeah, UCLA, like I said, 33-point win over UNC Asheville. They held Drew Pember to just 13 points. The big guy for UCLA, Bona, did not play against UNC Asheville. That would be big if he doesn't play against Northwestern. I don't think he will on just 2 days, but Jaquez, I would assume Adige gets him, and then Campbell will probably get Bowie. But a couple really important matchups there. UCLA really struggled from three minus David Singleton, so I don't think they're going to blow out Northwestern, and in a close game, Northwestern can do it. So the last region here, Joe, I think is the Midwest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Okay, yes it is. So Houston looked really unimpressive against Northern Kentucky, I thought, and they ended up winning by 11, but that was a pretty close game. And Northern Kentucky shot just 5 of 33 from behind the arc. That probably would have been a game if they just made a couple shots. Marcus Astor did play in the first half, but re-aggravated his groin injury. So a lot of question marks around Houston. They really struggled to score. And Houston will be meeting Auburn in the round of 32 in Birmingham, Alabama. Auburn beat Iowa in the first round. And, Joe, you kind of said it earlier, but I was really unimpressed with Iowa in this game. And I think Auburn, there's a couple runs in there from the Hawkeyes, but Auburn kind of had their way for this game. And I'm not surprised to see them win. I think we both predicted that they would win. Now they got a good chance to knock off Houston. But Iowa haven't been to a Sweet 16 maybe under McCaffrey, they haven't been to a Sweet 16, but I was coming in to the NCAA tournament on a 2-game losing streak, and they made a couple shots, but overall super disappointing in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess one positive before we absolutely eviscerate them is Penn Stanford did have 21 points, but if you're an Iowa fan, last year, you could kind of salvage the Richmond loss with the Big Ten tournament banner. This year, I think you had some exciting classic games against Michigan and Michigan State, but that's really it. I kind of think very similar to Illinois, a team that had maybe more ups than Illinois did, but certainly had their fair share of downs. And, their last 2 times we saw Iowa, which was yesterday against Auburn and against Ohio State, they're a different team, but they don't hit threes. They're 7 of 27 yesterday. If you're an Iowa fan, that usually spells disaster, and I can't really. We can talk about the direction that the Hawkeyes take after the season, but I just can't even call it anything but not impressive. So Iowa, just more of the same story, and my tone is very bleak right now because I don't know how I could sugarcoat it in any way. This is Iowa in March. I don't know if it's more of an indictment on the Big Ten, and that'll be a bigger question we answer in the offseason. But just no good shooting. Chris Murray was limited, and he couldn't get help from anyone else on the team besides Stanford. And to beat Auburn, they really needed. I really think Iowa had to stay ahead most of the game, and they fell behind early, kind of got close, but Auburn held them off, and Iowa, I think, started jacking some shots that they would not do if they weren't desperate. Sean, what do you think? Was Iowa desperate?
Yeah, it looked like right from the start they had a couple runs in them, like I said, but I never thought they were going to win the game. And I've watched a couple of Auburn games this year. To give up 83 points to them, that is a bad defensive effort. I mean, Auburn has had some games in the 40s this year. Northwestern gave up 40 points, and they're frequently in the 50s and 60s. A couple of 80s here and there against some of the doormats of the SEC, but and it's not like either like Wendell Green, who can do it, went nuclear or anything like that. He was 3 for 10 from the field, and Janai Broom he cooked Iowa. 19 points, 12 rebounds. They had no answer for him. I never thought Iowa was going to win, and 7 of 27 from 3. They're never going to be an elite defensive team like we've said, but when you're not making threes, you are probably going to get picked off in the NCAA tournament, and we've seen it a lot. I don't think it's really an indictment on the Big Ten because they don't really play like the other teams, kind of like post up and play defense like that, but their style doesn't seem to work in the NCAA tournament. You see all the TikToks and YouTube videos of characteristics of teams that lose early, and it's teams that are really high in offensive efficiency and really low in defensive efficiency, and that's Iowa. So no second weekend for them again, not necessarily surprising. I think Auburn is a great matchup for Houston, and at home, that's going to be a really, really good one. We'll see. We'll go over the game times after we finish this bracket because they are out for both Saturday and Sunday. But I was really unimpressed from Iowa, but it's not like I really expected more because I thought Auburn would rough them up a little bit and force them out of their stuff, which they did, but I did not expect them to score 80 points. So Iowa gets knocked off, and then in the next pod, Miami comes back late against Drake. Drake kind of choked that game, unfortunately for them. Tucker DeVries, their best player, Missouri Valley Player of the Year, 1 of 13 from the field. And so the Hurricanes move on to the next round. And then the next game, Joe, just happened. My Indiana Hoosiers, I would say, took care of Kent State. Only an 11-point win in the end of the game, but I was really happy with how easy this game was. And Miami might be a little bit of a tough matchup, although after watching their game today, I'm not too worried. But I think, obviously from your point of view as a fan of another team that doesn't watch them every day, you have anything different on the Hoosiers or kind of just very business-like performance?
I would say business-like. Trace Jackson Davis had a million dunks, so if you're into dunking, this was your kind of game. It's one thing we have to highlight about Indiana's performance. Take more threes, man. I mean, come on. You don't know when your season's going to end. 5 of 14, 35.7%. That's not bad at all. And Miller Kopp had 6 looks, which I think is really good. But, I think Indiana needs a lot more from their bench. Only 4 points tonight. And I think when you play a team like Miami, and then as Indiana would get further into the tournament, you need bench contribution. And we've highlighted that at times. But you're going to get 20 a game out of Trace. Maybe he's going to be accompanied by someone else. Hood not his best game tonight. They clearly didn't need it, so maybe he gets going again. But Indiana wasn't anything I was overly impressed with, but nothing I was too concerned about either. Miami, of those two teams, is a team I would worry more about based on their performance. I think that'll be a really good game on Sunday. So the Hoosiers, my message to you before this game would have just been avoid disaster. I'm sure they saw what happened to Purdue and figured, let's just not have that be us. And they didn't. And that's what you have to do. It's survive and advance. And that's a very politician's answer when it comes to March Madness, but it's the right answer. So.
Yeah, I think I'll ask you this. Obviously, Indiana was the last game to tip of the round of 64, and having seen all these upsets, do you think it's a positive for the better team, the favorite, the team that should win going into the game, to see a couple upsets already, so they might bring it a little more? Or?
I think absolutely. I think every year, everyone knows it's March Madness. Everyone knows the name. But you do need direct proof. It's kind of when we were kids. We heard not to put your hand near the fire, but plenty of us certainly put it near the fire, right? Until we saw little Johnny or little Jimmy get burned, or if we were the ones, unfortunately. And luckily for Indiana, they saw little Jimmy and Johnny do it before, i.e. Purdue and Arizona do it before they did. So this is a very popular upset pick too, Sean. So, I give a lot of credit to the Hoosiers. Kent State is a great offensive team. I didn't come away from the game thinking Kent State was a bad team at all. The MAC overall as a conference, I think, is pretty impressive. So, Indiana, good win. We'll just call it good. I wouldn't call it great, like we said. Good win. Any win in the NCAA tournament is good, and they did it.
Yeah, I would just say, I really thought the defense was very impressive. Hood Schifino, 4 of 11, didn't have his best offensive game, but him and Trey Galloway really got into Sincere Carey. He's their best player. He only had 5 for 18 from the field. He did get his 15 points, but his 1-3 was 0.1 away from a shot clock violation, and he had a couple other tough shots that went in. But defensively, I think they were there. It never seemed like Kent State was going to come back. I didn't think their game plan was all that great. We heard so many times about how them coming in, how they hung with a couple of the big guys early in the year, like Houston and Gonzaga and Charleston. But after watching today, it seemed like they may have been playing those games not to lose by 20 because they like never sped the game up. They never like trapped. I mean, they played some full court press, but they never. I didn't think their body language was very good. It didn't seem like they thought they had a chance. And going in, their coach said, we think we're going to win this game. We think we're better than Indiana, and they didn't play like it, in my opinion. But Trace was great, 24 and 11. Race Thompson, 20 points. He's a really big player, I think, outside the Big Ten. Most teams in the Big Ten have 4 men that are pretty big and can cover them, but certainly mid-majors, and certainly Miami doesn't. So look for him to get involved early against the Hurricanes. And, Miami, I didn't think they played very well today. I probably feel a little bit better about the matchup after I saw their game today. I know they turned over Drake a couple times late and put together points in bunches, but I think the 4 spot's going to be big for Indiana, and their ability to contain some of the Kent State guards. Hopefully that translates to containing some of the Miami guards too, because they're fast. They will probably make a couple tough shots, but I wonder if a line's out yet. But I'm pretty confident going into Miami. Obviously anything can happen in March, but solid win. I think nothing crazy. What you did is repeatable, and let's do it again in a pretty short turnaround here. So we'll move down now. Iowa State, Pittsburgh. Probably the worst basketball game, the worst display of basketball. It was 59-41. Iowa State started off the half in the first half with not a field goal for the first 9 minutes, and then they started the second half 2 of 23 from the field. Just a total nightmare of a basketball game. And Pitt becomes another one of those first 4 teams to advance to the round of 32. They got their big guy back, which is big for their next game. But I don't know what else has to be said there. Xavier coming back late and taking away the upset from Kennesaw State. Joe, I'm not sure if you caught this game, but I was really impressed with how Xavier came back, especially because I thought they were totally done.
Yeah, I thought it was something in the microwave that was about to explode, and right before the person hit stop and took it out, because Xavier, you felt it in the crowd too, or heard it in the crowd. So credit to Xavier, and credit to Sean Miller too, because Sean Miller, the story of him in Arizona, and their fans will tell you, was great regular seasons followed by, I don't want to say maybe collapses, but very disappointing tournaments. Did not make a Final Four there, which at Arizona, for their reputable basketball program, is kind of insane to hear. And we don't need to keep ripping Arizona. Plenty of pundits nationally are doing that, so that's not what this cast is for. But, real credit to him. He definitely felt the pressure, and maybe he didn't sweat through his suit, so maybe he had a kind of cool about him. But, credit to Xavier. All you have to do is survive in advance, and they did just that. So people who want to rip them, I know a few controversial calls, a lot of hate on their Instagram page. So if you don't like Xavier, I encourage you to go in the comment section. Maybe don't share your belief, but certainly a very entertaining read if you are into all that Instagram smack talk, which, we're millennials, so maybe we are too. But Sean, do you want to end with I think the most impressive performance for the Big Ten team?
Yeah, so I think just for Xavier for 1 second, they were definitely going to lose that game, I thought. And, sometimes in these games, they're close in the second half. You always feel confident, but I thought Xavier was definitely going to lose, and they came back. That's impressive. That's something you can build on. And, an 11 seed Pittsburgh that is susceptible to getting blown out. I think Xavier, they survived and they advanced. Simple as that. Next game starts 0-0. Doesn't matter if you win by 1 or 100. But that last game, Joe, by Penn State, Texas, I would say kind of handles Colgate pretty well. Colgate's a team that we've seen cause a little bit of trouble in the NCAA tournament before, but they haven't been able to put it together for 40 minutes. They didn't make a lot of threes today, and Texas pulled away late. But the final game that we'll talk about here happened late yesterday. and that was Penn State. Booty ball, as Brad Underwood calls it. They took care of Texas A&M. They ended up winning by 17, but as Raftery would say, they had the puppies organized from behind the arc, 13 of 22, and it seems like they're taking their impressive play from the Big Ten tournament and moving it right to the big dance, which sometimes doesn't always happen. But thoughts on Penn State?
Phenomenal game. Andrew Funk is someone who's caught a lot of heat in the media for not hitting big shots. Yesterday, 8 of 11 from the field, 8 of 10, 80% on 10 or more attempts is a dream. That's something you would see in 2K from a kid who plays that game all day. So that is phenomenal from Penn State, phenomenal from Andrew Funk. He definitely deserves highlight. I understand Jalen Pickett also had a great game, but Andrew Funk scoring 27. I'll make this bold claim. If he scores 27 every game, you might see Penn State in the Final Four. I don't think that part of their game is repeatable. What I would say is their shooting and their offense and their veterans, we're going to say it again, because that's why Penn State was very popular on this cast for me and Sean. Just can't say enough. We've highlighted Micah Shrewsbury most of the year as one of our more impressive. I kind of regret not picking him for Coach of the Year, but Collins and Willard were good candidates. I'm glad I didn't pick Pater like my co-host did as one of the two. But
well, it's a regular season award.
Regular season, yeah. But no, seriously, Penn State. I think you're kind of like Maryland in this department. I think it's house money from here on, and I really think they have a legitimate shot against Texas. And I cannot think of a hotter team in the country. Maybe that's because I'm Big Ten centric, but they've got to be among the top 3-4 hottest teams in the country, and out of nowhere too. Penn State is a 10 seed. Normally, you don't say that about 10 seeds, but if they really put it together, maybe I'd pump the brakes on Final Four, but they're definitely capable of beating those Longhorns from Texas. What do you think, Sean?
I think one of those other hot teams in the country, Joe, unfortunately for them, is Texas. They rolled through the Big 12 tournament. They're on a 6-game win streak. 2 of those wins are against Kansas, and I think it's going to be really tough for Penn State. I'm not saying they can't do it because they're playing at that level right now. They're playing at that level too. Their formula is to play a lot of defense and to make a couple threes. And just watching that game with Texas A&M, just the way that is, the three balls change the game. They don't have to make as many shots as other teams if they shoot a majority threes. And they hit a couple threes. You look up at the scoreboard and they're up by 11. And we're like, whoa, it seems like both these teams have made the same amount of shots. And they did, but Texas has some guys who can really guard, but who do you put them on? Do you put them on Andrew Funk and run him to half court on the catch, or do you put him on Jalen Pickett and make sure he doesn't back you down? I think I don't know. I think Rodney Terry's going to have a long thought about who's going to cover who in the game plan. And Texas made a lot of threes against Colgate, so maybe they come back to earth a little bit, but they've got a lot of good players. They have some depth. They have some glue guys, but they're 13 of 23 from behind the arc last time. I think it's going to be a really good game, and I really think it's close to a 50-50 chance just because Penn State is playing so well, and Texas is playing pretty well too. Texas is a 5-point favorite right now.
That's way too much.
I would think that's a lot, to be honest.
That's way too much.
But Penn State has only lost one game since, as far back as this month, and that was a 2-point loss to Purdue, which they had a chance to win it at the end. They did lose to Rutgers at home, but that was a while ago. And I'm looking forward to that one. It'll be at 7:45 on CBS, and I really think they can do it. If they stay connected defensively and make a couple threes, maybe 7 or 8, I think there's going to be a shot. Because if they, Pickett could have just not passed the ball like he did so many times. People are making threes. He tried to get him open looks. He passed up a couple open mid-ranges, I think, or maybe even short mid-ranges to kick the ball out to 3. And he doesn't have to do that. So I don't think, if Penn State doesn't make as many threes, they're immediately going to lose. But, any more thoughts on Penn State? And then we'll get it. And if not, we'll get into the bracket pool and then the times for tomorrow.
Yeah, Sean, I guess one thing I would say is, besides Penn State, I think they're the obvious pick for performance of the week in terms of Big Ten teams in the tournament. Who would you put second? I think that's clearly for me. I think that'd be Michigan State, but you could make a case for Northwestern too.
Yeah, I would say all. I mean, Maryland probably was a coin flip, and they ended up on the other side of it. But I think all the other Big Ten teams were the better team for the entire, not the entire game, but for most of the game. You know, IU was the better team for 40 minutes. Northwestern was the better team for 40 minutes. Michigan State was the better team for 30 minutes. And Maryland just won a toss-up. So all those teams, I would say, performed pretty well. I would think it probably goes to Northwestern. So I think Boise State is a little better than USC, but both teams pretty similar performances too, I would say. You know, kind of went back and forth a little bit in the first half, but it seemed like the Big Ten team would pull away, and they did. But yeah, I wouldn't say it was Indiana really, because they were supposed to win, and they did, and they performed well. But I think Northwestern and Michigan State probably could have lost if they didn't play pretty well, but they did, so they're advancing to the next round. What about you?
And Sean, before we, I think that sums it up. I don't feel adding anything would do it any justice, but I think we'll just do a quick NIT thing. We won't be more than 2 minutes on this. I know majority of you here are here to listen to our takes on the bracket and the bracket pool, but I'll just be quick for our religious Big Ten listeners.
Well, three teams in the conference. It's worth mentioning. 3 teams in the tournament.
Yeah. So, well, or the not in tournament. I'm a Michigan fan, and I'm willingly able to acknowledge it. Michigan beat Toledo. Again, I think Toledo's an impressive team. They are very good offensively. I just think the talent differential caught up with them. Could not respond to Hunter Dickinson, and Kobe Buffkin hit a few big shots. They did kind of pull away at the end, and now Michigan will have Vanderbilt coming up here in almost 10 hours as of this recording.
That'll be a tough game. Vanderbilt's pretty good.
But I would say whoever wins that has probably pathway to the NIT Final Four in Vegas because they'd be playing the winner of Morehead State and forget the other one. But let's just talk about Rutgers real quick, a team that should have been in the NCAA tournament, and I'm still not wavering on that take. A team that, should have been all but guaranteed playing in the Big Dance, playing at home. I understand they lost to Hofstra. All of these comments, they deserve to be in. Of course they deserve to be in. Losing to Hofstra does not change their resume for the regular season. And, a really tough way for Caleb McConnell to go out. I assume Paul Mulcahy comes back. Clearly a lot to figure out in the offseason for Rutgers. I don't think they lack an identity, though, so I'm not as worried about them as other teams. What I would say is Wisconsin, although I didn't watch a lot of the Bradley game, what I would say is I think if you're a Big Ten fan, you should cheer for a Michigan versus Wisconsin NIT final, because I think that would be a pretty meaningful final. 2 teams that over the last 3 seasons have really started to hate each other. 2 teams, Hunter Dickinson, I promise you, hates Wisconsin. Wisconsin fans hate him. And despite all the photos you see between Greg Gard and Juwan Howard, I would guess placating at media days, they don't like each other either. And a little fun fact I'll share with our listeners before we get right back into it. Greg Gard's daughter does go to Michigan, which I find very funny because he's the number one enemy of a lot of Michigan fans. Yet his daughter chose to go to school here. So I think that's a little fun fact you can tell your friends tomorrow when you're watching the games. But, let's go into the bracket pool, Sean.
Well, yeah, I just want to say Hofstra hit a couple of ridiculous shots.
Yeah.
And Nevada got smoked in the first 4. Hofstra's a good team. They went toe-to-toe with Charleston and the Colonial this year, and Nevada got smoked in the first 4. And Stephen Crowell, 36 points for Wisconsin, too. So, like you said, Michigan goes to Vanderbilt tomorrow at noon, and Wisconsin hosts Liberty on Sunday. Hopefully for the Big Ten that they advance and make the metrics look a little bit better at the end of the year, because they do average that stuff out and stuff. But we'll go into the bracket pool. Like you said, it's up here on the screen in the YouTube. We've got a couple of people who had some champions who are knocked out. 260s leader, Jaden Brooks, and then I'm not going to read the rest of them. I'm there in 6th. So I got a chance. My champion's still alive. I did lose Arizona is my final 4, but still a long way to go. It's great to get those first-round upsets and everything, but you really have to pick the champion right to win the bracket pool. And of the millions and millions of brackets picked at ESPN, there's not a single one left that's perfect after FDU beat Purdue today. So that's where we're at in the bracket pool, Joe, and I think that's it for tonight. We will be back with a round of 32 recap in the beginning of the week before the Sweet 16, but thank you for tuning in to today's edition, or this morning's edition of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. A little bit of a blend there between the round of 64 recap and the Big Ten report. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.